Hi everyone, Aaron here for Zollotech, and there has been a lot of information regarding everything from AirTags to the upcoming MacBook Pros and some other things, as well as iOS 14. So I thought I'd cover that in this video, go over some of those things that seemingly are true and some that may not be so true. So I'll start off with some of the hardware and then we'll talk about iOS 14 at the end. Now the first thing is AirTags. If you've seen AirTags at all in my other videos that I've mentioned, basically they're going to be a little disc, and that disc will allow you to place that in a backpack or something like that, and it will allow you to locate that item. The new information says that they're going to be waterproof, which seems to make sense, seemingly because it will be sealed, and that it will also charge like an Apple Watch using a magnetic charger. So if you haven't seen this with an Apple Watch, you take the charger and it just clicks onto the back. It's magnetic, it doesn't come off, and it just charges like this. And that would be a great way to charge the AirTags. So you just set them on an Apple Watch charger or a similar charger. It just adheres to it magnetically, charges it up, and you're good to go. And usually if you're using something like a Tile, those batteries last for months. So hopefully we'll have the same sort of scenario, but it seems like that's what's coming up. Now, the next thing is there was an update with Target inventory, meaning the actual store Target had a little leak in their inventory about new Apple TVs, which would be very welcomed. It's pretty old hardware at this point. I don't know that it will see a redesign, but it would have internal hardware that's much faster, along with an 8th generation iPod Touch and some new Apple Watches. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that it would be redesigned, but it would have a new Apple Watch along with some new bands that were mentioned. Now, every 4 times a year or so, Apple comes out with new watch bands, and then they'll put out new colors. So it could just be something like that, or it could also be some new models as well. I personally would like to see a redesign of the watch, but I wouldn't expect that until closer to September. I would love to see a round watch, but I don't think we're going to see that for some time. So all of those were mentioned in the inventory of Target, and usually when that happens, there are products that are going to be updated. Now, as I talked about the 13-inch or 14-inch MacBook Pro models that would come out soon, hopefully, maybe with a March event, those should have not only the updated keyboard like we see with the 16-inch MacBook Pros, but also use the Intel 10th generation Ice Lake chips. So we should get a bump in performance with specs and some updated codecs and things like that. Now, some of the rumors that are a little bit for later this year have to do with the iPad Pro, and we've heard this a little bit before. Now, this is my 2018 iPad Pro, but the one I'm talking about would be the upcoming one with the triple camera setup that we expect with the next generation iPad Pro. So what that means is not only would it get the triple camera like I've mentioned before, but the display would, instead of being LCD like this display, it would have mini LED. And that's seemingly the next display technology. I've seen it at CES, micro LED, mini LED, and it gives you all the advantages of OLED, but has longer life and more consistent colors and things like that. So Apple has done things like that in the past where they push the technology first through the iPads and then they bring it out later to the iPhones as it becomes more widely available. So hopefully we'll see something like that. Now, there's some other information about what the next generation iPhones could have in them. With the 2020 iPhones, they may have the new Wi-Fi standard 802.11ay, which is basically a short-range Wi-Fi for higher speed data transmission. So that makes sense if you were using things like your iPhone to transmit data to an iPad via AirDrop. They could get a bump in speed by doing wireless connectivity through 802.11ay. So we'll have faster speeds. That makes sense. You can transfer things from your phone to your Mac or phone to iPad in every which way. I use it every single day, and I would love to see those speeds pick up even more. So right now they're okay, but if you can make it much faster, it's about 4 times faster. I would love to see that happen. Now, there has been no news of any iMacs yet or anything like that, although I would love to see one that looks like a Pro Display XDR. That would be incredible. And then finally, to do with Mac information or Apple processors more specifically, it seems like 2021 may be the year of the Apple CPU to replace Intel in some of the MacBook lineup. So that makes a lot of sense. This iPad Pro is incredibly fast using Apple's latest generation chips, and if you put them in a MacBook, I think you'd be pretty happy with the speed of them, as long as you're not doing incredibly intensive rendering tasks and things like that. However, Apple may have overcome that, and you may see a huge increase in speed if you switch to that, even in something like a Mac Pro. So maybe we'll see that a little bit later. It's hard to say. I'm most excited for iOS 14, and iOS 14 is going to be shown, if they continue to do what they've done every year, Apple will show it at the Worldwide Developer Conference in June. And so that means we'll see updated features, possibly some small redesigns. There's been no rumors of a major overhaul, but there has been a lot of information about stability. But there's been some recent information that seems to be pretty reliable regarding being able to switch your default app. So what that means is maybe you don't want to use the stock email app. You could switch it to Outlook. And of course you can use Outlook or any of the others now, but you could set that as a default app, meaning that when you open a link to email, it would open not in the regular mail app, it would open in Outlook or Spark or whatever you're using instead. So maybe you're trying different email apps, such as I've been doing lately. You'll no longer have to kind of bring it into Spark or bring it into Outlook. You can just tap the button. And the same is true for being able to set your default browser. It looks like Apple may be opening that up a little bit more. So you could set Chrome and Firefox as your default browser or any other that's available. And then also the same is true of music. So instead of using the stock music app as a default, you could set your default music app as Spotify. This is pretty typical. You can do this on just about any other operating system, just not iOS. And also you could set Spotify as default on, say, a HomePod. So I hope we'll see something like that. There's no reason we shouldn't be able to set what app we want to be default. So hopefully we'll see that in the future. Now, finally, there's been some information about iOS 14 multitasking. And the information says that iOS 14 will allow multitasking to look more like it does on the iPad, but rather on the iPhone. So where you have all these different applications open, you can see them, you can swipe them off, and they'll populate behind, or you can just swipe them one by one or multiples at the same time. This may be coming to iOS 14. However, the one thing that the update or the rumor doesn't mention is that Apple employees have had that option to turn on iOS for quite some time. If you're an internal employee, you actually have that option to already do that. So instead of using the normal multitasking like we have here, it would look like a grid like it does on an iPad. Apple employees have had this for quite some time, so they can just flip on those options or turn them off. And in fact, they have a lot of options that we don't have. So instead of just the settings we have, Apple internal employees have a lot more because they're testing software, trying the best way to do things, and figuring out what works best for them. And so that may or may not be true. They could always turn it on for everyone else, or it could look the same as it does today. But that leak may or may not be real, but it's definitely what internal employees have had for quite some time. But that's it for all of the different information. Hopefully you enjoy these type of videos. If you do, let me know in the comments below if you'd like to see more of these possible upcoming future release videos. And also, if you'd like to get your hands on this wallpaper, I'll link it in the description as I always do. If you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe. And if you enjoyed the video, please give it a like. As always, thanks for watching. This is Aaron. I'll see you next time.